Hey everybody, can a made-for-TV movie hold up against some of the legendary cinematic pieces released in the theaters? Let's take a look. Alright everybody, today we're going all the way back to 1979 to take a look at a movie, miniseries, call it what you will, that, I'm just going to say it right now, I love this thing. We're going all the way back to look at Salem's Lot. Now before we go any further, before we dig into this gem anymore, once and again, and as always, to the trailer. And this is a long trailer, but much like the movie, goes by pretty quick. Enjoy.
Ben Mears has been away too long. And now at last, he's come home.
My men fought at Valley Forge.
Daddy, come back safe.
Home to the childhood memories. To the old familiar faces. To a life unmolested by time.
And with your saints, let him rejoice in your presence forever. We ask it through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Home to Salem's Lot. A town too good to be true.
What was that?
Did you happen to notice the time when the boys left?
We shouldn't have gone through the woods.
It's a shortcut.
They should have been here half an hour ago.
Wait! Danny, wait!
Something is happening. Something terrible.
Henry! Where's Ralphie? Well,
Where's your brother?
Once the kid disappears, then this. You're not leaving Salem's Lot, are you? I'm not leaving.
Don't you understand what's happening?
you?
Yes, I do. It's in the Marston house. Good evening. I dreamed that you slept there all night. Yeah. A little tired. Didn't sleep much last night. I was dreaming. Somebody out there.
Sweet dreams.
I let him in.
Oh, something all just happened
Since I came here.
It wasn't a dream.
Stop, holy man! You can do nothing against the master.
And they're preying on one another. The vampires are creating vampires.
The master wants you.
It's a geometric progression. 2 times 2 times 4 times 8.
There's a dead man upstairs.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil.
Look at me. Ned Zibbett's body has disappeared from the morgue.
Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Bill!
And Susan's in there. Run! No! Look at him!
Stephen King, the best-selling author of Carrie and The Shining, takes you on a startling journey to Salem's Lot.
All right, Salem's Lot was directed by the one and only Tobe Hooper. Let's do this. We're talking about, he did The Fun House, which you know I already reviewed a long way back. And he did Life Force, which you know I reviewed a long way back. And Invaders from Mars, and Mortuary, and Night Terrors, and The Mangler. And he did 2 motion pictures that are just monstrous. Let's face it, folks, he did Poltergeist and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, it is what it is. His list is long. Let's keep moving. All right, everybody, playing Ben Mears. He was a singer. He was an actor. He was was all over the place. We're talking about David Soul. And how many movies do you get to introduce where he's the star of it? Oh, let's keep going. Obviously, he's been in a lot of shit. We're talking about he has been in stuff like Tides of War, and the Hanoi Hilton, and the Stick Up, and Magnum Force, which he was awesome in. Remember, he was one of those road cops. And on TV, and like The Yellow Rose, Casablanca, Secret of the Sahara, and little things like Murder, She Wrote, and Here Come the Brides. And of course, to us, he will always be Ken Hutchinson, one half of Starsky and fucking Hutch, and we all loved that show. It was amazing. Forget that movie they made. Watch the TV show. Playing Mark, a name that probably you haven't heard of or thought about in decades. We're talking Lance Kerwin. Let's roll. We all know he was on things like The Family Holback and Cannon and Shazam and Police Story and Insight. And he popped up on like Little House on the Prairie. And he was in all those ABC after-school specials, man. I mean, he was in a bunch of... And he was on Hotel and The Bionic Woman. And he popped up on Wonder Woman. And, of course, if you're of my age, you're going to remember he did that TV show called James at 16. After that, he kind of faded out. But whatever it was, man, for a while, you've seen his face a lot back in the day. All right, playing Susan, the ever-so-cute Bonnie Bedelia. We're talking about she was in stuff like Heart Like a Wheel. She was in Die Hard, not just one, but two. She was in The Big Fix, and They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And The Boy Who Could Fly, which is a great little flick that doesn't get enough attention. And Presumed Innocent, and on TV, she was in like The Division, and Parenthood, and Bonanza. She rocked, and we'll get to how she did in this later. She did great. Heads up. Anyway, let's keep going. Playing Straker, James Mason. Okay. Obviously, he was in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He was in A Star Is Born, in The Verdict, in Evil Under the Sun, in Lady Possessed, The Wicked Lady, North by Northwest, For God's Sakes, Island in the Sun, The Blue Max, Heaven Can Wait, back in the day with Warren Beatty. Remember that shit? That was a really good flick, actually. So, James Mason, long career. You've seen him before. I don't even know where else to go. Playing Mike. I've talked about him before. Talking about him again. The one and only Geoffrey Lewis. Let's do it. We're talking about he was in a whole bunch of those Clint Eastwood flicks. We're talking about he was in stuff like Every Which Way But Loose and Every Which Way You Can and Bronco Billy and High Plains Drifter and Pink Cadillac and other stuff too. Night of the Comet and The Devil's Rejects and Double Impact and Tom Horn and The Lawnmower Man. Does anybody remember The Lawnmower Man? You got it. Anyway, The Lawnmower Man. Geoffrey Lewis, you know he's one of my favorites. Is what it is, just the way it goes. Playing Bill, Ed Flanders. Man, on TV, you've seen his face. Let's roll. We're talking about, obviously, he was on St. Elsewhere, which he's probably the most famous for. But he was also like on MASH, and Hunter, and Marcus Welby, and Daniel Boone, and Blind Ambition, and Kung Fu, and Mannix, and he popped up on Hawaii Five-0 back in the day. So, come on, man. You've seen him around a million times before. He was in this. He was in all those. Is what it is. Also, there's a lot of other faces and names that pop up in this thing that you've probably seen around, you probably recognize. You're going to see them and say, I've seen them someplace else before, and they are in this too. We're talking about people like Julie Cobb, who was in stuff like Charles in Charge and Designing Women, and Lou Ayres, come on, who was Hawaii Five-0 and Highway to Heaven, and Fred Willard, Jesus Christ, movies like Best in Show and Mighty Wind, and George Dzundza, who never gets talked about, man. Never. But he was in stuff like The Deer Hunter and Crimson Tide, and Elijah Cook Jr., who we all know, man. He's been in a million things, from The Champ to Rosemary's Baby, and Kenneth McMillan, who was in stuff like, Carney, and Marie Windsor, who was in the old-time stuff, like everything from, like, Freaky Friday all the way back to Chamber of Horrors. So there is a shitload of people in this motion picture, so sit back, enjoy it, take it in, look at all the familiar faces. God, we got to get to the story. Alright everybody, I'm going to do this in 90 seconds or less to keep it fast, keep it entertaining, keep it moving, and keep it going so we can get to where we'd all much rather be. the summation, and I'm going to keep it short too because that trailer was fairly long and fills you out a lot. Okay, you got Ben Mears. He's a writer, an author. He's on his third novel. He's trying to construct it. So where does he decide to go? Back to his hometown that he left when he was only 10 or 11 years old. His hometown of Salem's Lot. You see, an incident happened there when he was just a young kid. An incident that scarred him forever. He went into the old neighborhood haunted house, the Marsden house, and he's seen something in there that was supernatural and freaked him out for the rest of his life. Well, now he's come back to write about it, and it's just the way he is. But it just so happens that at the same time, this guy Straker has moved in. He's bought the Marsden house, and he wants to open up a little local antique shop with his partner, Barlow. Kurt Barlow, to be exact. But nobody ever gets to see him. He's just this thing that they hear about and they talk about. Well, along the way, you get to see Ben Mears. He meets this cute school teacher chick, Bedelia. They strike up a relationship. He gets to meet her dad, who's a doctor, blah, blah, blah. He goes back and he sees his old school teacher, who kind of introduces him to a younger version of him, Lance Kerwin, who's like into all this weird, strange, macabre stuff, but he's also a writer, writing the school play. And he's like, hey, this kid's kind of reminding me of you. He might have that talent. Along the way, weird things start happening. Stuff starts going strange. Much like in the days past at the Marsden's house, kids start disappearing locally. Things start happening. Is it because of Ben Mears? People look at strangers odd. Is it because of Straker, the newbie, and his never seen Mr. Barlow? Nobody really knows. But before you know it, all hell starts breaking loose. There's vampires running all over Salem's Lot, and the shit is hitting the fan. That's just about it, folks. That's basically the gist of the movie. You get the idea. That's all you really need. You have the long trailer. You had that. Let's go to the summation. All right, everybody. Let's get down to the real nitty-gritty. Does Salem's Lot work? Yes, Salem's Lot works, especially considering what it is and how it came to be. We'll get to all that in a minute. Let's get the regular crap out of the way. The directing, come on, it's Tobe Hooper. It is what it is. You know it's going to look good. You know it's going to look cool. Yes, you're going to have the limitations that it's not in widescreen. It's in the old television, I think it was 4:9 square format. It is what it is, but it still looks good. It's still filmed well. You're going to enjoy it. Enough said. The writing, spot on. Spot on. All the characters are kind of true to who you would think they would be. Nothing gets silly. Nothing gets stupid. Well thought out. Spot on. And of course, the acting. And that's one of the places where this thing shines also. The cast in this delivers. I don't care. Everybody across the board. You got some heavy hitters in here, man. You got fucking James Mason, who's just phenomenal in everything he's ever been in. You got Ayres, who is just great. You got David Soul, who knocks it out the park. Everybody delivers in this. Spot on, period. Speaking of the writing, I know, before we go any further, I know there's major discrepancies between Stephen King's book and this movie. I get it. They do that in every Stephen King adaptation until maybe they make another Stephen King version of the adaptation later on where he gets to set it straight and say, oh, this is my Shining and this is my Salem's Lot and blah, 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 blah. Is what it is. I get it. But for me, I didn't mind all the little segues and the takeoffs. I think some things work better on TV than they do in a novel and vice versa. And there's things that were in the novel of The Shining, or there was things in the novel of Salem's Lot where I'm like, I don't know if that would work on TV. And I think this is an example of sometimes breaking from the book works out a little bit better. And speaking of that, I have to add, thank you. Thank you for giving us a terrifying vampire. I love it when you see vampires that are a little bit more the terrifying kind, you know, the Nosferatu kind, you know what I'm talking about? The ones with the bald head and the bony build and the scariest shit to look at vampires. I don't get a big kick out of a vampire who comes out looking like he just did his hair, he's wearing more makeup than my grandmother, and he's sitting there trying to schmooze into you with some cool talk. That doesn't really work for me. I don't want my vampires to be these elegant dudes, and I really sure as fuck don't want them to twinkle in the fucking moonlight. This was a great vampire simply because it was terrifying from the minute you seen him. It was no holds barred. He had his caretaker. That was the charming one, leading it around, doing its bidding. But you didn't have to sit there and watch Dracula or whatever the fuck it's supposed to be come up and try to schwooze you with some goddamn weird vibe and lay into you with his charm, and then you're horrified when he switches around. Didn't need it. He had a caretaker to do that, and he could just stay the vicious killing machine that he was, that at times looked like his own caretaker could be terrified of. Who knows? Now let's get back to why this motion picture works, and the limitations that it had to work in. The three things that make this motion picture work, plain and simple. Mood, pacing, and this thing that you never see anymore, because it's unheard of in today's modern Hollywood, character development. Let's face it, this motion picture had 3 hours, because it was really a miniseries broken over 2 episodes over 2 different weeks. It had 3 hours to play with. And that's one of the things that makes it great. You have this time to really get to know the characters, to care about the characters, to find out who they are, how they work, what they think about. And that is one of the things that sorely gets missed in today's Hollywood, where everything just runs from jump scare, jump scare, jump scare, jump scare, and it just dives into whatever they think is going to make you go, ooh, next. They don't care about the characters, none of that kind of shit. But this does. You get character development that just makes this thing work perfect. You get vibe all the way through it. This movie, all the way through it. And if you watch it on DVD, connected as one, it's a 3-hour and 3-minute movie. It is what it is. It's loaded with vibe. It's loaded with perfect pacing. And there's parts of this motion picture right from the get-go that are going to make you feel like, what's going on? Everybody's a little bit odd. Everybody's a little bit dark in the beginning. It's not that everybody's perfectly likable. They're people. They have pluses, they have minuses, but they're all relatively who they are. And it works. That pacing, that odd feeling, that creepiness, that character development. Oh my God, this thing has those things in spades. And let's keep in mind, they accomplished all those things within the confines of a TV movie. Now, I'm not talking modern day TV movies, for God's sakes. I'm talking a 1979 TV movie. They didn't have all the advantages of just being able to throw in tons of blood and gore like any other thing would be able to. They didn't. They didn't have the advantages of throwing in all the profanity and all that kind of crap. They didn't. They didn't have the mandatory boob scenes and all the kinds of nudity and running around in it. They didn't. They achieved everything they did in this television movie in the confines of a television movie. And to pull that off, really, to give you that kind of feeling, to give you that kind of a scary vibe, in those rules, in that sandbox, is pretty phenomenal, actually. Think about it. To this day, aren't there scenes that still stick with you if you've already seen this? I mean, come on. The kid at the window. All that kind of stuff, so effectively done in its day, so effectively done for its time. It was kind of mind-blowing that they nailed it so well. Are there any negatives to this thing? Well, of course there's negative to anything. The biggest negatives to this thing is that you have to keep in mind it is a TV movie as you're watching it, because there's a bunch of little cuts in there that sometimes don't make perfect sense. They had to put commercials in. It is what it is. So sometimes in the middle of scenes there'll be that, the hand will come up and everything will go dark, and then it'll just pick up at the next scene. And you can kind of roll with that because, well, even regular movies do that. In this one, though, sometimes you just see two people, come down a flight of stairs and it'll go dark. And then it'll come light again and they're still going down the stairs. And you're like, okay, that's where they had a commercial back in the day. It is what it is, and I got to roll with it. There's little glitches like that. And of course, there's things you can spot too, like, the old poor man's process of people driving down the road. Put a vehicle in a garage, put a black screen behind it, get a couple of guys on the side shaking it, and have the actors do their lines. You spot stuff like that, but hell, every movie from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and probably even now still do that kind of stuff. Now they just do it and they put like CGI in the windows and shit like that, so it looks really good. But poor man's process, it is what it is. If there's any other bummer notes to this thing, it's really kind of like you wonder how David Soul didn't have a bigger career. I mean, let's keep it real. He, at the time, was riding a wave of success. He had Starsky and Hutch. He came off, fucking Magnum Force not too long before that. We're talking, he had #1 albums in the United States, over in England, and his singing career actually continued a little bit bigger overseas than it stayed here. I mean, we all remember, "Don't Give Up on Us, Baby." We all remember that shit. It was classic. It was a great tune. I think he had another one, Silver Lady or something like that. Well, anyway, his career was bigger overseas. He moved to England at one point, did a whole bunch of work over there, whether stage, whether TV, whatever it was. But his life was always a little bit tumultuous. You know, I had some problems with drinking, a whole shitload of marriages, whatever. David Soul was still a good actor, still a good performer, did what he did. Sadly got hampered a lot because he injured his back doing that famous jump onto the car, I should say, in the beginning of the Starsky and Hutch thing. Screwed up his spine, his pelvis. By the third season, he could barely walk. Was what it was. Hey, still had a good career after that. Anyway, everybody, get out there and watch Salem's Lot. It's a classic, old-time fun flick, made-for-TV movie. It was a miniseries, really. They condensed it now to a 3-hour flick. They actually did that years ago. And it's exciting. It's fun to watch. It was released overseas as an actual movie in some places. Get out there and enjoy it. If you haven't seen it, check it out. If you have seen it, go back and relive some memories. It can't hurt. Be good. Take care. Stay out of trouble. Help a friend. Be kind to a stranger. But above all else, under no circumstances, for no reason, don't ever, ever take any bullshit from anybody. See you soon.